That's me.
My name is one of these.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning again. How is everybody? It's a quiet room. I was going to say, did folks need a little more coffee? So, good morning again. My name is Hannah Zellman, and I am the director of Philadelphia Fight's Institute for Community Justice. And I also have the distinct honor of being the coordinator for the Prison Summit. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 10th annual Beyond the Walls Prison Healthcare and Reentry Summit. We started this summit 10 years ago in the basement of a church with a handful of workshops and a small but dedicated crowd. It's incredible to stand here 10 years later at a day-long conference featuring over 30 workshops and drawing close to 700 people. We got to this point because of you. Whether you showed up as a planning partner to help guide the content of the summit, or shared your expertise as a speaker or panelist, or demonstrated your commitment to this work by attending and participating. I want to especially thank those of you who are here for the first time. Raise your hand if you're here for the first time at the summit. Thank you so much for coming out today. I also want to offer a special welcome to Senator Leona Washington's office, who has sent a representative here today. As we've grown, what we have to offer at the summit has also evolved. This year, we're thrilled to be able to offer an employment resource computer lab, which is located in the main concourse. On hand are digital literacy trainers to support folks in working on resumes or cover letters or online job applications, as well as peer mentors from ICJ's Society for Employment and Equal Rights, who have their employment resource guide on hand and tips for getting a job, even with a criminal record. The Access to Recovery program has brought a whole plethora of business attire, so I encourage you to visit their table and check out what they have to offer if you're going for a job interview and need some resources for that. I also want to encourage you to stay until the end of the day. Our closing plenary is on Ban the Box, which I know is a hot topic in Philadelphia these days. They're going to be discussing our next steps and how we move this work forward to ensure that all former prisoners have access to the labor market and can really succeed in their reentry. As we do every year, we're honored to have the opportunity to showcase art from prisoners and former prisoners. This year, the Mural Arts Program and Art for Justice have graciously loaned their pieces for display. They are absolutely stunning, and I encourage you to check them out all along the concourse. They're really, really beautiful, most of which are actually made by prisoners on the inside. We also have HIV testing all day, so feel free to check out the testing van right outside the convention center. I cannot stand up here without doing a whole laundry list of thank yous. First, I want to thank all of the Philadelphia Fight staff who support AIDS Education Month. And it is a lot of staff. I want to give them a big hand because they do an incredible amount of work. From handling our tech needs, to helping photocopy a bazillion programs, to hauling boxes of resource guides to and from the convention center, we could never do this without the help of that staff. I also need to thank our incredible planning committee for being willing to engage in the planning process. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of voting, and as some folks have pointed out, a lot of emails from me. Can we hear it also for our planning partners? There are too many for me to list right here, but they are listed in our program, so you can check out who our amazing partners are in this planning. In particular, I also need to thank the Philadelphia prison system, from coming to planning meetings, to designing workshops, to publicizing the event. or to coming out here today as speakers and attendees. Your commitment to this event and to AIDS Education Month is invaluable. Commissioner Giorla, I also want to thank you for ensuring that this partnership flourishes under your leadership. This year, we were also very fortunate to have Bruce Herdman, Chief of Medical Operations of the Philadelphia Prison System, as our co-chair. Bruce went so far and above his duties as co-chair, attending almost every planning meeting, pestering various prison staff members to join workshops, and bringing great perspective, creativity, and ideas to the table. I also need to thank Sean Hawes, the Public Information Officer for the Philadelphia Prison System, for all her work in the planning process. This was her first year working with us on AEM, so I hope this doesn't send her running to the hills, because it is a lot of work. It's a really intense process. She has helped coordinate and broker our yearly HIV 101 presentations for corrections officers in the Philadelphia prison system, which brings me to thanking the incredible staff of the Institute for Community Justice for being willing to spend June going into the jails every day, at every shift change, in every facility. That's 6:50 a.m., 2:50 p.m., and 11:50 p.m. So it is a huge commitment of their time and energy. All my housekeeping stuff, I now want to talk a little bit about this summit, which is obviously very dear to my heart. This summit is an incredibly unique opportunity that brings together all of us who are touched in some way by imprisonment and reentry. Service providers, the faith community, legal service providers, correction staff, probation staff, former prisoners and their loved ones, activists and advocates. In my experience, these are people who are not often in the room together. But today, all of us come together to listen to each other, to share critical wisdom and expertise, and to strategize on how to do this work better. Ultimately, we share the goal of putting ourselves out of business. In order to do that, we need to make sure that we're preparing individuals for reentry when they're inside, that we're supporting them when they're coming home so that they don't go back, and that we're investing in our communities in order to lessen the likelihood that folks go to jail in the first place. We're here because we understand the intersection of parallel crises of mass imprisonment and the AIDS epidemic. We know that these are crises that are driven by many of the same structural factors: poverty, homelessness, racism, and in some cases, our misguided priorities. We're thankful for those in the community who are advocating, for those in power who are here today and are champions for solving these seemingly intractable crises. We're here today because we're committed to healing in a time of mass imprisonment, because we're committed to restorative justice, and because we have a vision of a safer, more vibrant, and whole community, and because we believe that we can realize that vision. I believe that it's that hope that brought us here today, and I'm confident that we'll leave energized, inspired, and with renewed commitment to this work. I now have the pleasure of introducing our Honorary Chair for AIDS Education Month, District Attorney Seth Williams. This is a man who has repeatedly and publicly commented on my hair. So I made sure. I'm
jealous of it.
So I made sure it looked real nice today. But that's not much of an introduction. So let me just thank you again for being such an incredible ally to our work. You have showed up time and time again for our events, from these large conferences to the small ribbon cutting for our little computer lab at ICJ. And you have truly demonstrated a commitment to justice, and we are so grateful to have you as an ally in this work.
She's right, I am jealous of her hair. Can you tell? All right, good morning. I said good morning. Good morning. Outstanding. Now, they told me I could talk for 90 minutes. Say, no? I got a couple of people shaking their heads. No? All right. I won't do that. I won't, because you have a great keynote speaker here, and I want you to hear from our prison commissioner as well. But most importantly, because you're here for a great day of education and learning. And I'm very, very glad to have been asked to serve as the honorary chairman of AIDS Education Month and to come speak again now to our 10th annual Prison Healthcare and Reentry Summit. So first, let me ask all of you to put your hands together for Hannah Zellman, for all of the employees and people of Philly Fight who put this together. Now, I've said this many times before. Some people say, well, why was the DA asked to serve as the honorary chairman of AIDS Education Month? And I take it as a great honor to have been asked. But I think what it represents is that fighting AIDS, preventing AIDS, isn't just the responsibility of people that are infected. Am I right? Is my microphone working? Okay, I'm just checking. It's everyone's responsibility. What affects you affects me. What affects you over there affects my daughter who's sitting right here. We're all in this together. I told folks I had the opportunity to go to South Africa to learn about their criminal justice system. But the most important thing I learned there, I was in a cab, and everywhere I went, I saw older black men saying to their seniors, Ubuntu. I had to ask my cab driver, what does that mean? He said, well, and it's a Zulu word, and the direct translation is humanity and respect. But the meaning is much deeper for those Zulu men that say it to each other. It means that I am who I am because of you. That I am who I am because of who we all are. And so that's what we're lacking here in Philadelphia, am I right? There's no Ubuntu. That's what allows young men just to shoot each other because somebody stepped on somebody's Timbs. So I'm very glad to be here today and to serve in whatever capacity they've asked me as this honor. It's just I show up, and I'll gladly show up wherever they ask me to show up for this purpose. What I want to do briefly, they told me I could talk for 90 minutes, so what I want to do briefly is I'm going to deputize all of you as assistant district attorneys, okay? All right? So you're all now deputized as assistant district attorneys. Now there's no drop, there's no pension money with this. And there's not even a health plan, I'm sorry. But I really believe that preventing crime is all of our responsibilities. We're here today at this reentry summit really to help folks who've already committed crimes transition back into society, am I right? But I believe that preventing crime, some people say, well, why is the DA even here? Shouldn't he just be out locking up folks on Broad Street? And don't get me wrong, some folks on Broad Street need to get locked up. But it has to be the right people. But more important than that is crime prevention. So I'm very glad that all of you are here today. You have a lot of great seminars, classes, and workshops to attend. I think it's very important. And as Ms. Zellman explained, what's very, very important is the intersection for us to understand how economics, right, economic development, education, public health, and public safety, how they're all interconnected. And to be an advocate for any one of them, you have to be an advocate for all four of them. We have to do all that we can to ensure that more people get the mental health services that they need, and not just when they get locked up, but in the community ahead of time. I learned today from the prison commissioner, about 28% of the inmates in our Philadelphia County prison system are receiving some sort of mental health services. It used to be that we provided those services to people out in the community, but President Reagan cut all those services. And so now the #1 mental health provider in America is the Los Angeles County prison system. #2 is the New York County prison system. #3 is the Cook County prison system in Chicago. So I hope you come here today and you learn all the great things about how we can help folks who've made mistakes go about their lives now. It's all about getting a second chance, am I right? Does anybody here ever get a second chance before? All right. See, my daughters, they give me a second chance every day. So again, I won't talk for the 90 minutes. I'm just very thankful to have the opportunity to be here. Most importantly, people ask me everywhere I go. The front page of the Daily News today just talks about the homicide rate in Philadelphia. I tell folks, now all of you have been deputized as assistant district attorneys now, right? So this is your responsibility. I don't need you to go chasing after drug dealers and jumping on them, okay? But for every drug dealer, we have about 80 to 90 what? Drug users. So I tell folks, if you want to help me prevent crime, if you want to help me reduce the gun violence that's a result of this drug culture, help get a family member into rehab. If you need help, get help. And if you have a family member that needs it, all of us, I've had cousins and family members that were addicted, like all of you in this room have had family members or yourselves have had problems. There's no shame in saying, I need help. I need a hand. So let's extend that hand to those that need it and to give them second, third, fourth, and fifth chances. Amen? Amen. Ubuntu.
Can we give the DA another round of applause for those incredibly on-point remarks? He's a hard act to follow, though. As I said earlier, one of the most important partnerships that we have is with the Philadelphia prison system. For over a decade, the PPS has welcomed us as guests in their system and worked with us to ensure that individuals living with HIV have access to discharge planning and continuity of care support. They've gone beyond that, well beyond that, participating in AIDS Education Month and remaining open to and enthusiastic about opportunities to bring HIV education behind the walls, not just for prisoners, but also for prison staff. I want to thank and welcome Prison Commissioner Giorla.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Hannah, for that kind introduction. First, I'd like to acknowledge our district attorney, who has been a great partner with the Philadelphia prison system in our combined effort in the criminal justice community in Philadelphia, not only to fight crime, but create opportunity so that there are alternatives to a criminal lifestyle. Thank you. This is my fourth prison summit as commissioner. And prior to that, you know, I was in administrative capacities, but I was not so closely involved in the effort, in the healthcare effort in the prisons to stem AIDS and HIV. And during the first year, I spoke about the extraordinary partnership that we have with Philadelphia Fight, with the health department, and the prisons. You know, rather than guests in your facilities, we see you as, in our facilities, we see you as partners, because it was important to us that we address the whole person. You know, we can address the criminal case, and we can tell people to make their fines, cost, and restitution. We can try and create some employment opportunity. But we also have to know that if you're not healthy and if you're not feeling well, whether it's mentally or physically, you're not going to be able to continue with your recovery and your reentry into society. And the second year I was here, I talked about some efforts we made to reduce our prison population and what progress we were making in that regard. And I have to say today that although we reduced our prison population substantially, it's still not where we want it in Philadelphia. In other major cities like New York, they have 8 million people. They have 13,000 to 14,000 people in jail. In Philadelphia, we will have 1.5 million people. We have 8,700 people in jail today. So we know there's work to be done, and we know there's other alternatives that we have to create so that people have choices and people make good decisions. Last year when I was here, I talked about the spectacular success, what I see as spectacular success in our prison testing program for HIV. When I first took over as commissioner, working with Dr. Herdman, who's the co-chair for this event, our voluntary testing numbers were about 25% of those coming in our doors. We knew that had to be addressed. We knew that there was a public health problem that really had to be determined and had to be treated. So we went to an opt-out testing where we asked everyone who came through the door, you know, would you like to be tested for HIV? We gave them information, we gave them education, and we gave them counseling and other materials along with the health department in Philadelphia Fight. And the good thing about that, was, even post-release, they could be referred to Philadelphia Fight if they wanted to follow up and continue their treatment. Now, looking at that, we seen that was still not enough. We knew that there were people who were falling through the cracks. We knew that there were people who may be in denial, or people who couldn't come to grips with the fact that they may have been exposed to or contracted or needed treatment for HIV. So we went to an even more extensive testing program where we already take blood samples. We already try and find out. We test for other diseases. We test for other conditions. We want to make sure that everybody's chronic conditions are addressed. And you know, when they come in the door, we present them with a full view of not only what their legal status is, but what their physical and mental condition is as well. Because we know they can't begin to adjust until they address those things. So we went to true opt-out testing. We'll test the sample anyway. We'll test the sample anyway, and we'll ask them if they want to know. And if they want to know, we'll tell them. And if they want to know, we'll counsel them. And if they want to know, we'll treat them. And then we'll refer them post-release to Philadelphia Fight. So we've tried to provide a complete continuity of care as people come through our doors, because we know, you know, coming through the facility, your mind's on other things. You may not address these problems, and you may be in denial. But like the district attorney said, you know, treatment is one of the most important things for those with substance abuse problems, those with mental illnesses, and those whose lives just aren't going in the right direction. So with that, we upped our testing percentage to up over 80%, which is extraordinary for a voluntary testing program. There are many jurisdictions where it's mandatory, many jurisdictions where it's done automatically, but in the state of Pennsylvania, we want to do it voluntarily. But there was another, and this year, what I'd like to talk about is the work that has to be done. We still have the extraordinary partnerships that we've had in the past. Many of our staff can tell you that because they're here today. Would anybody who's an employee of the prison system please raise your hand? Would anybody who volunteers or provides services in the Philadelphia prison system please raise your hand? So as you go through today's workshops and events, you'll be able to talk to these people and ask them questions about what goes on, what the true state of affairs is in the prison system, and answer any questions you might have. There's still work to be done. Last year, we conducted a blind seroprevalence study of those who declined testing in the Philadelphia prison system. And that gave us some surprising and disappointing results. We found out that 60% of those who decline testing are HIV positive. I'll repeat that. 60% of those who decline testing are HIV positive. So our next step, our next duty is to reach those individuals, convince them to be diagnosed, and convince them to be treated. So their health won't be a factor as they go forward and try and seize the other opportunities that are provided to them. In this day and age, you know, everything's dependent on a, and maybe I'm not saying this correctly, but the latest tweet or the latest Facebook status, and hot button issues tend to come and go within minutes, faster than Kim Kardashian's boyfriends.
All right. Chill, all right. Topical.
You know, I watch Good Morning America every morning. But I have to tell you, we can't lose sight of the fact that we're not done. We can't lose sight of the fact there still is work to be done, and there's people out there who haven't realized that HIV is a danger to them, that HIV is a danger to the community. They may have unwittingly present a risk of infection to their families, to their loved ones, to strangers. And it's not that difficult to deal with. You know, as you say, get tested, and if the test is positive, get treated. You know, we want to make sure that we extend that opportunity to everyone. And finally, I'd like to say that I'm pleased to participate in this event. Bruce Herdman, and I don't know if he's here yet, our Chief of Medical Operations is really committed to making this event a success. Philadelphia Fight, despite the fact that Hannah mentioned roll call information that they give to our officers. Well, they have to be here like our officers at 6:50 in the morning to deliver that roll call message, and 10:50 at night for a whole month to reach all our facilities and all our staff. And I want to thank them for that, because this isn't an isolated problem that just affects inmates. This affects all of us. This affects all of us, and the response has to be from all of us. But I'd also like to say that the reason we have our staff here and they participate fully is because we want to dispel any myths about incarceration. Years ago, the image of behind the walls was always put forth as if something strange and something mysterious and something perhaps unseen takes place in correctional facilities. And we want to dispel that myth. We want to let you know that we're trying to provide the best services we can, whether it's physical health care, mental health care, custody services, or some professional interaction with the people that are committed to our custody. We don't, you mentioned Sean Hawes, who was our new public information officer, and many of you may have known Bob Eskin, who is our retired public information officer. They do a fantastic job in arranging tours and releasing information about the activities in the prisons. We have an extraordinary participation rate in training for our sentenced inmates, something we want to, our goal is 100%, but right now about 78% of our sentenced inmates participate in an education program, a job, or some type of vocational training or therapy. And we feel that's important because if we don't provide this treatment, if we don't provide this opportunity, well, all we're doing is keeping people in suspended animation. And as you mentioned, it's our role. I don't want to make my staff uncomfortable, but it is our role to put ourselves out of business, to create the atmosphere and the opportunity so that those who get committed to custody will reconsider what they've done, maybe change the lifestyle, maybe change their habits, maybe seek treatment and help, and then they won't have to come back through our doors. I guess I want to say we have enough business right now. Business is booming. And it's unfortunate, and it's something we want to reverse. So I want to thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate this opportunity. And although I won't be able to stay for the day's events, I know that I'll get some complete feedback from the staff who are here to attend. Thank you again.
Thank you again, Commissioner Giorla. Before I introduce the person that is introducing our keynote speaker, I do want to quickly say that FIGHT does not do discharge planning and continuity of care work alone in the Philadelphia prison system. We have, I think, probably the entire Philadelphia linkage team here from ActionAIDs, and they have been great partners to us. You can check out their workshop at 10:30 called HIV Continuity of Care to learn more about the work that they are doing, just as a quick shout out. I now want to introduce our Executive Director, Jane Shull, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Good morning. I want to first thank you all again on behalf of Philadelphia FIGHT for attending this summit, and I want to also thank all of the many people who attended so many planning meetings over at Hannah's office at ICJ to make this summit possible. This is the first year that the prison summit moved into the mode of you had to present a workshop to the committee, you had to get it together in advance, you had to have all the speakers 2 months early, and so many people stepped forward to do that I think we really have a tremendous, tremendous day planned for today. I also want to thank Seth Williams for serving as one of the most active honorary chairs that we've had. And I want to say that I think that Seth is exactly right, that the reason that we asked him to serve in this capacity is because We think that the AIDS epidemic is everybody's responsibility. We are living in the middle of the worst epidemic in human history. Of the millions and millions of people who are infected worldwide, only 1/3 worldwide have access to or are receiving the medicine that they need, that if they did have access to it, would actually keep their HIV under control to the point where they could live a normal life with HIV. Now, that's better than it was. It was 7% a few years ago, but it's nowhere near where it ought to be. And it's better than that in the United States. But worldwide, only 1/3 of people actually have access to treatment. And we're also living at a time where, with the tools that are available to us today, we could end the AIDS epidemic. Now, our topic is not this, but I want to say to you that if we as a community really took responsibility for ending the AIDS epidemic, if we were able to identify everyone infected with HIV, which is why it is so important that the Philadelphia prison system is making testing available in a way that people will accept it, and if we were to offer everyone infected with HIV treatment, we would be able to end the epidemic, because people who are on treatment are much less likely, 96% less likely, to pass HIV on to other people. The other thing that we have learned at FIGHT over the years is that the crisis of mass incarceration in America is also everybody's responsibility. We opened the doors of the Jonathan Lax Treatment Center in 1997. By 1999, it was obvious to us that there was something going on with people with HIV, because so many of the people who we saw had a history of incarceration or didn't come for their next visit because they were incarcerated again. We learned that 20% of people living with HIV in America on any given day are incarcerated. And we realized that many of the same things that make people vulnerable to acquiring HIV also make it far more likely that they will be incarcerated. Homelessness, mental illness, substance abuse. It's in some ways a reflection of the same epidemic. And we have recognized that this is, in fact, our responsibility as people who were interested and started out working in AIDS, and it is the whole community's responsibility to try to find ways to address the epidemic of mass incarceration that we see in our society. And that's why we are so pleased that we have been able to form durable, strong, lasting, and real partnerships with the Philadelphia prison system, and why we appreciate so much that the leadership level, Commissioner Giorla, has been a supporter and has helped us, and the many people at the Philadelphia prison system, as well as our many partners in the community who we have worked with. I am who I am because of you. I love it. And that is really the message that we are trying to convey in all of the work in AIDS Education Month, and in particular in the work that we do to try to help people transition back to the community so that they will not end up back in jail again. And that brings me to Dean Trulier, our keynote speaker, who has developed one of the most powerful programs in America to do just that. Harold Dean Trulier is director of the Healing Communities Prison Ministry and Prisoner Reentry Project of the Philadelphia Leadership Foundation. Healing Communities has been implemented in over 20 sites nationally in partnership with organizations such as the Progressive National Baptist Convention, the Christian Association for Prisoner Aftercare, and the National Women's Prison Project. Dr. Trulier is an ordained American Baptist minister, and he serves as an associate professor of applied theology and director of the Doctor of Ministry program at Howard University. He also serves as a fellow at the Center for Public Justice and is founding president of Globe God Leading Our Best Efforts Ministries, which is a youth service agency in Philadelphia. He's taught religion, public policy, and community studies in several institutions, including Yale University, Drew University, Hartford Seminary, Eastern University, and Vanderbilt. He's a graduate of Morehouse College and Drew University. He's published more than 70 monographs, essays, sermons, and reviews, including the African American Church and Welfare Reform Center for Public Justice and Faith-Based Initiatives with High-Risk Youth. And he also writes a bi-monthly column for Prism magazine. I've heard Dr. Trulier describe his work on several previous occasions, including what was actually, I believe, the genesis of our asking him to speak here today, which was at a workshop at this conference last year. And we felt, and I feel very strongly, that he has a model that can actually be applied, and the wider audience of this Prison Summit should hear him. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Trulier.
Thank you, Jane. It's really a privilege to be with you. It's a privilege to be here. I'm checking my watch, make sure that I keep my time straight. I used to be a pastor, and I looked at my watch once during a sermon, and one of the deacons yelled out, "That's all right, Reverend, there's a calendar behind you." So I want to make sure that we maintain the integrity of our time. It's a privilege for me to be in Philadelphia. I was born and raised here. This is my hometown. Like the district attorney, I'm a graduate of Central High School. But on my resume and as part of my introduction this morning, one of the institutions from which I graduated is not listed. I thought that that would be relevant also, and that's the George W. Hill Correctional Facility in Delaware County, where I was inmate number 100002648. You never forget your number. And so when we work in the area of prisoner reentry, for me, this is like, since we've been talking about hair, this is like the hair club for men. I'm not just the owner, I'm also a client. And so it's a privilege to be able to talk with you about what we're doing and about how this fits in with the work of Philadelphia Fight and with the intersection between HIV, AIDS, and prison ministry and reentry. The fact of the matter is that I've been doing this work at this intersection between religion and criminal justice for almost 30 years now, and doing it just about everywhere but in my own backyard. So while we've had good relationships with congregations and with those who are involved in fighting against the AIDS epidemic in a number of cities, we've worked with the Maryland Department of Public Health and their infectious diseases division. We've worked with a group called Forging Ahead for Community Empowerment in Harlem, which is the oldest AIDS organization in New York City. This is only the second time I've been able to come here and work with you in Philadelphia. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity, because it's important that no matter where else I go in the country, I've got to pay attention to home. Because at the end of the day, after all of those nice things that Jane Shule read about me, I'm just another overweight kid from 55th and Locust trying to make it. So let me talk a little bit about what we do and talk about it in the context of why we're here. Because one of the things that's interesting to me about prisoner reentry is the fact that so many people misunderstand what's necessary in order for people to be successful when they come home. When I was at the Hampton Ministers Conference last week, I did a survey of the people in our workshop, and I asked them, what's the most important thing for someone who's coming home? Name the two most important things for someone to make a successful transition from prison or jail back into society. And as the hands went up, everybody named the same two things. They said, number one is jobs. People need jobs when they come home. And they said number two is housing. People need housing when they come home. And if you read the newspapers, that's what you'll believe. If you read the public statements, that's what you'll believe, that people need jobs and people need housing. I'm here to tell you that statistically speaking, if you have a job, that's great. If you have a house, that's great. But jobs and housing are actually third and fourth on the list. Because any real analysis of the data on successful reentry from jail or prison will tell you that the two most significant impediments to the successful transition back into society are, number one, antisocial thinking, and number two, antisocial companionship. Those are big words that Dr. Thomas O'Connor coined in his meta-analysis of the data. Basically, what it means is how you think and who you hang with determine how you make it. I can get you a new house, I can get you a good job, but if you still have the same mindset and you still hang with the same folk, you're heading back up the State Road or Graterford or whoever knows where. The fact of the matter is, and this is statistically significant, I'm a preacher, but I'm trained as a sociologist. You know, sociologists, we study things. We are people who demonstrate the patently obvious through the methodology of the incredibly obscure. But any real sociological analysis will tell you that your thinking and your friendship network are twice as significant as whether or not you get a job or a house. And so one of the things we've been doing in healing communities, we've been going to the faith community and we've been saying, if how you think and how you behave, who you hang with, are the two most important things about the transition back into society, what institution of all the institutions that exist in our communities, what institution majors in how you think and who you hang with? Churches, masjids, synagogues, temples. That's what we major in. We major in changing people's minds. We major in giving people new friendship networks. And so one of the things we've been saying is that the faith community absolutely, positively has to be at the table when we deal with issues of reentry. The problem is that in the faith community, we have developed a level of shame and stigma around incarceration, around HIV/AIDS, around homelessness, around mental illness. We have developed our own sense of stigma. In fact, many of our televised versions of religion will tell you that if you're really hooked up with God, you won't have to deal with any of that stuff. You can name it and claim it, blab it and grab it. You can have what you say. God is a cosmic bellhop that as long as you say the right things and have the right formula, you too can leave North Philly and head up to Lavrock. When the reality is that the faith community is already connected to those who are behind prison bars. The faith community is already connected to those who are suffering with HIV/AIDS. Mathematically we know this, but I found this out experientially when I was an inmate. Now, of course, as a preacher, when I was an inmate, and now you're, what did he do? What did he do? All I can tell you is I'm allergic to alcohol. When I drink, I break out in handcuffs. When I was an inmate, since I was a preacher, I wanted to go on the down low. I didn't want anybody to know that the Rev was in jail. Got me a nickname, Doc. Didn't nobody know who I was, so Doc was just kind of sliding through. They knew I was a teacher. That was good enough. One day I'm laying on my bunk and a young man peeks around the corner and he says, "Pastor?" I said, "Who wants to know?" He said, "It's me, Ty." I said, I don't know any Ty. He said, "I used to be a drummer in your chorus, your community chorus." I looked at him, then he called his mother's name. His mother had been on my staff when I was a pastor. Then he said, "I'm so glad you're here." I said, "That makes one of us." He said, "No, Pastor, you don't understand. You see, I need to be locked up right now so that I can get my head together. And I told God, if you really want me to change while I'm in here, you need to send somebody in here to work with me. And now that you're here, I know he's answered my prayer." And that young man now is on his pastor's staff. That young man now is leading the men's ministry in his church because he saw his opportunity while incarcerated to make a change. But the reason that we were able to hook up is that we already had a connection. The church, the synagogue, the masjid need to realize that we are already connected to people who are incarcerated. Before I got out of George W. Hill, I was locked up with 4 guys whose mothers I had pastored. And one guy came in and he looked and he said, truly, how are you related to the guy that used to be the pastor over there in Chichester? I said, oh, yeah, I know him. That's my wife's husband. We're trying to say to the community of faith that we are already connected to the inmate population. We are already connected to those who are infected with HIV/AIDS. What we have to do is deal with the shame and the stigma. And part of what we do at Healing Communities, we come into congregations and begin to talk about reducing the shame and reducing the stigma about these populations. Because, you know, church folk can get funny sometimes. Oh, I can't deal with inmates. I can't deal with inmates. I can't deal with inmates. I had one of my students at Howard University told me, she said, Doc, I can't deal with inmates. I just can't deal with inmates. I said, okay, can I have your Bible for a second? She said, what for? I said, well, you can't deal with inmates. We need to do some editorial work. See, the first thing we have to do is take out the book of Genesis, because Joseph was an inmate. Then we have to move over to the prophets, and we have to take out the book of Jeremiah, because Jeremiah was an inmate until this African named Ebed-Melech came and organized 30 guys in a prison ministry and a support system to get him out of solitary. And then we got to get rid of the book of Daniel, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were lifers. Daniel had a death sentence. And then we've got to move over to the Christian Bible and the New Testament. That's just the Hebrew Bible. You go over to the New Testament, and now you got to get rid of the book of Revelation, because that was written while John was in custody. Then you got to get rid of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, because he wrote those two. And then you got to get rid of the 1st and 2nd Peter, because Peter was an inmate. In fact, some of you may know that there's a story in a book called the Book of Acts, chapter 12, where Peter got locked up. The church prayed for him all night long. God gave him early release. He came back to the church, knocked at the door, and they wouldn't let him in. So things really haven't changed, have they? Somebody said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Take that out of your Bible. It was written by an inmate. And my Catholic friends, God bless you, you wear an inmate around your neck. How can the faith community turn its back on inmates when inmates are so central to all 3 of the major religious traditions in America? Well, Reverend, you see, those were good people who got locked up. They were good people. They got locked up for the right reason. We're talking about bad people out there in Graterford. Bad people. You mean like the dude that was walking down the street one day and he saw one of his boys, and one of his boys was in an argument with his boss, and the boss started wailing on the boy, and the dude jumped in the middle and pulled the boss off him and started wailing on the boss and accidentally killed the boss. I said, yeah, man, that's manslaughter. Okay, well, you just locked up Moses. Or the musician, because you know musicians can't be trusted. Because I was reading about this one musician, he had the day off and he was up in his penthouse. And he was checking out the action. He said, I think I'm up. Look at her, she fine. She fine, I'm gonna write me a new song. The Lord is my shepherd. I see what I want. I gotta get with that. Yo, bro, she got somebody. That's all right, we can take care of that. And he arranged a little accident for that fine woman's husband. And after he got killed, this musician, I'm trying to remember his name, I was reading about him the other day. King David, yeah, King David. Conspiracy to commit murder. As people of faith, we can't distance ourselves from those whom society has stigmatized. Because the whole of the faith tradition itself is about removing shame and stigma from people and helping them to reclaim their dignity. All of our faith traditions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Baha'i, all of them affirm a basic human dignity. And the inmate, the one who suffers from HIV/AIDS, the person who's homeless, is as human as the President of the United States or any member of the Tea Party. And so part of what we do when we go to congregations, we help them deal with the shame issues. We help them deal with the stigma issues. We help them to understand that you are already connected to the prison population, and that rather than objectifying them and pushing them way over here, we need to understand how we're connected to them. I was speaking to a church in Wilmington, Delaware, and I was talking about the need to make preparations for people who are coming home. And after it was over, the chairman of the deacons ministry came up to me and he said, "Reverend, how do you know my grandson?" I said, I don't know your grandson." He said, "You mentioned my grandson. You were just talking about him." I said, No, I don't know your grandson." He said, "Somebody had to tell you about my grandson." I said, "I don't know your grandson." He said, "My grandson's name is Jamal. You said Jamal's going to be home in 3 months." I said, "Well, no, I was just preaching. That was a rhetorical device. You know, and Jamal will be home in 3 months. Will you be ready?" You know, I just picked the name out. He said, "My grandson's name is Jamal. He's in Sussex prison, and he'll be home in 3 months. His wife came up to me and said, "And he's burned every bridge in this family. But now that you've put it the way you've put it, we're going to call a family meeting and reconsider." In that same church, another woman came up to me and she said, "I'm 81 years old and I have a grandson. And I told him, if you keep going the way you're going to get locked up. Because you see, Reverend, me and him don't smoke the same kind of cigarettes, if you get my meaning. And I told him, if you get locked up, I'm never coming to see you." And he got locked up, and I haven't gone to see him. But because of your remarks today, and Bishop McNair, I must not have preached too well because he called it remarks. You know, I thought it was a sermon, you know, but your remarks. I'm going to go see my grandson this afternoon. And she said, "You know what's peculiar, Reverend? For 40 years, I worked in the juvenile justice system as a court advocate. I advocated on behalf of everybody else's children. But when it was mine, I turned my back. That's not right, is it, Reverend?" See, the fact of the matter is, and Jane put it very eloquently when she said this is all of our problems. We could make a major dent in the prison population if we would just follow the bloodlines in our own families and the friendship networks in our own communities. Because the two things that everybody can do is help somebody get their thinking straight and provide a new network of social support. You may not be able to help people with jobs. We've got all kinds of workshops today on services, and they're important. Job readiness, health readiness, educational readiness. And some of that may be above your pay grade and over your head, but everybody can be a friend. Everybody can be a reconciling presence. And what we've said to congregations around this country is that if your congregation treated the prison like it treats the hospital, we could make a major dent in our prison population. See, here's what congregations do when somebody gets sick. You know what happens when somebody gets sick, right? Somebody gets sick, the whole congregation, people visit, they send flowers, they do all this other kind of stuff. When somebody gets locked up, "Reverend, my son got locked up yesterday. Please pray for me, but don't tell anybody." And so the inmate doesn't get the same care that the sick person does. Now, flip the script. Imagine those of you that are members of faith community, imagine your pastor, your imam, your rabbi getting up at a Sabbath service and saying, from now on, we will no longer visit the sick in this church, in this congregation. What we're going to do is we're going to get 3 people to volunteer once a month to go up to Einstein Hospital and do a service. That would be unacceptable, wouldn't it? Those of you that are Baptists, you'd have a meeting the next day. Those of you that are Methodist, you'd call your bishop. Those of you that are Pentecostal would start praying, I guess. I don't know. But the reality is that would be unacceptable, and yet that's how the faith community intersects primarily with the prison population. Train 3 or 4 people to go up on State Road, to go out to Graterford, to run out to Muncie and do a service when we've got connections there already, and we need to follow the bloodlines. To the prisons, we need to follow the bloodlines. To the halfway houses, we need to follow the bloodlines. To people with HIV/AIDS in our own families, and begin to provide the support that only we can supply as individuals. The fact of the matter is that there's no congregation in this country that doesn't have more people, watch this, more people currently in jail than they do in a hospital. And yet we're ashamed of the jail population. But once we remove the shame and the stigma, once we come to understand that we cannot afford to re-stigmatize people who are coming home. We cannot afford to re-stigmatize those who have HIV and AIDS. We cannot afford to re-stigmatize the homeless and people who've made mistakes, people who need a second chance. And, you know, and I heard the DA, he talked about and the commissioner about people needing a second chance. How many of you needed more than 2? I've needed a second chance, a third chance, a 4th chance, a 5th chance, a 6th chance, a 7th chance. I don't know how many more chances I have. I don't want to test those waters. I don't want to do that research, but I know I needed more than 2. And the thing that is so amazing about our religious traditions, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism, is that all of us affirm the fact that while a society may give up on a population, and while a family may give up on a population, and while a neighborhood may give up on a population, all of our religious traditions affirm the fact that God never gives up on anyone. And the joy is, for me, looking at people who have made the successful transition because they've had support, because they've had people to walk with them. I know people say, well, they need more than that. They need jobs. They need housing. And I know some churches that get caught up in the fact that, well, we've got to do everything. We've got to help them find jobs and help them find housing. Why? Because religion says we have to meet all the needs of all the people. No, it doesn't. I can prove to you that it doesn't. How many of you faith people have ever visited somebody in the hospital? Just show hands. You ever visit somebody in the hospital? Okay, because that's our duty as people of faith. We visit people in the hospital. All right, keep your hand, one more time. Keep your hands up. Now, keep your hand up if while you're at the hospital, you perform surgery. You prayed. But you didn't cut anybody open. You didn't prescribe any medicine. You didn't sew anybody up. You didn't change the bedpan. You didn't change the IV, because that's above your pay grade. You know, I know some people say, well, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, but let me tell you something. If you got on an airplane and the pilot came on and said, ladies and gentlemen, I've never flown a plane before. However, I am a Christian. I'm saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, and I've got the pilot anointing, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So just buckle your seatbelt and we're going to take off. You would get off the plane. Laying up there at Einstein in this heart surgery, and the heart surgeon comes out and says, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. And I've never performed surgery, and I've never been to medical school, but I've got the surgical anointing. Hallelujah. You get up off the table. We can't do it all. But there's a role that every one of us can play, and for those of us that are in the faith community, there's a role that our congregations can play if we will just follow the bloodlines and follow the family and friendship network lines to those who are currently incarcerated and provide the support and the reconciliation they need in order to make the successful transition back home. We're currently working with over 100 congregations nationally. We've got about 10 congregations that we've recruited here in Philadelphia, and if you have a congregation, you'd be interested in us in working with us, I'd be glad to talk with you, give you my card, give me a call, because we're trying to build a movement here nationally that can make a dent in the mass incarceration, can make a dent in the population of those who are stigmatized because of HIV and AIDS, a dent in the population of those who are homeless and veterans who are coming home, who are also being stigmatized. You know, not every veteran that comes home gets a parade. And so we're trying to build a movement of congregations that will reverse the curse and begin to work with those who are stigmatized, because the reality is that it's out of the ranks of the stigmatized that I believe God does his best work. There are people who are currently incarcerated. There are people who are currently infected with HIV/AIDS who, they don't just need rescue, but they're the ones who I believe hold the key to turning our society around. Because God has a habit of taking negative situations and turning them into something positive. Howard Thurman was one of the great preachers in America. He mentored Martin Luther King, among others. He grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, next door to a family that could not stand him or his grandmother. They saw them as poor, they saw them as illiterate, they saw them as unread, and so whenever the Thurman family would be on the porch, the family next door would go inside. They wanted nothing to do with Howard Thurman or his grandmother. They were just mean because they looked down their nose at him. They stigmatized them, kept them at arm's length. But the Thurman family was determined to be a blessing to those who had stigmatized them. And one day, their next door neighbor, the matriarch of the family, became sick. And Mrs. Thurman, Grandma Thurman, decided she was going to do something nice for her antagonist, and she went and got some chicken soup and some red roses and took them next door to this woman who had been hurting her. And the woman looked at them, and she just nodded her head and said, "That's fine, thank you," and she threw them out. She called her grandson and told her grandson, "Listen, those Thurman people are trying to be nice to me. I don't like them. Here's what I want you to do. Go out in the backyard and go where the chicken coops are and take this spatula and scrape all the chicken manure off of the floor of the chicken coop and dump it in the Thurman's backyard. Wait till they're outside so they can see you do it. I don't care how nice they are." And so the grandson obeyed, and he dumped that chicken manure in Grandma Thurman's backyard. A year later, the woman became ill again. And even though she had been rejected once, Grandma Thurman decided that she was going to try one more time and give this woman another chance. And she took the flowers over and she took the soup over, and this time the woman began to melt just a little bit. She said, "Thank you for the soup. And these flowers, I have to admit, they really are nice. I'm sorry I threw them out last year." And Grandma Thurman said, "That's okay. I just wanted to bless you with them." The woman said, "Where did you get these flowers?" She said, "I grew them myself." She said, "How did you get the stems to grow so long and green and the flowers to grow so red and full?" I hope you're ahead of me. She said, "You remember that chicken manure you dumped in my backyard? You thought that was something evil. But God took that and turned it into fertilizer so that I could come back and bless you." We live in a society that warehouses young men and young women, prisons and jails that sometimes feel like manure has been dumped on us as inmates. But the reality is that that very situation of adversity can be the place from which great blessings will flow. And the people like my friend Ty and others who have done time and come back and made a difference become those long green stems of righteousness and those full red flowers of beauty that can bless and transform a nation. To the extent that we make investment in this population, we will not only be rescuing people, but investing in our own future. All of our religious traditions talk about redemption and reconciliation. And through your actions, as you go home from this place, with the information you have, you will be commissioned not just as assistant district attorney, but also as agents of reconciliation and redemption in a world that seeks to dump manure on the stigmatized, but who will actually come back and bless us all. Thank you.
That was an incredibly moving and powerful call to action. Can we just give Dr. Trullier one more hand? So I want to say, I do believe that was a call to action. I want you all to take that as your charge as we move into the rest of the day. Workshops will be starting at 10:30. I want to thank everybody again for joining us today, and I hope that you have an incredible day full of rich information and inspiring workshops. Thank you.
Great.